They didn't even offer me water. The room was hushed except for the low, constant whir of the HVAC somewhere above the ceiling tiles. I sat across a glossy conference table from Martin Hale, the firm's newly installed COO, and a woman I'd never seen before who introduced herself as Dana from HR. Her smile was sharp-edged and deliberate, the kind that came from training, not warmth. My name is Nora Ivers. I'm 52 years old, and I've given the last 22 years of my life to Trenton and Chase, the PR firm I helped grow from a respectable Chicago agency into a nationally recognized name. I wasn't officially a partner, but in every way that mattered, I thought I was. Nora, Martin began, folding his hands together like a man delivering a keynote on empathy he'd memorized the night before. You've been essential to this firm's evolution, and we want to recognize your contributions. That word landed hard. Recognize. That's when I knew. In corporate language, recognition is just a polite prelude to being shown the door. We're implementing some strategic adjustments, Dana added smoothly, her tone dripping with artificial compassion. As part of a broader modernization effort, your position is being eliminated. I blinked once. A modernization effort? I echoed. Like refreshing a browser tab? Neither of them smiled. Martin leaned in, lowering his voice as if that made the explanation more reasonable. It's about alignment with contemporary trends, new voices, digital agility, future-facing strategy. He paused, waiting for agreement. I nodded once. Right, meaning I'm suddenly obsolete. Dana slid a folder toward me. We've prepared a transition package, and of course there will be outplacement services. I didn't touch it. Who's taking over my accounts? I asked. Martin hesitated. I wouldn't describe it as a takeover, more of a redistribution. Who, Martin? He cleared his throat. LaWoya Vance will be assuming a newly created hybrid strategy director role. LaWoya, the junior associate who once needed my help drafting subject lines that didn't scream spam. She couldn't pitch toothpaste without sounding apologetic, but she was brilliant at internal politics. I nodded slowly. So she gets my office too. Dana glanced sideways at Martin. There may be a reconfiguration of space, which was confirmation enough. I'd seen LaWoya hovering outside my office earlier, chatting with facilities, gesturing at my shelves like she was already planning where things would go. I thought it was strange at the time. I shouldn't have. I straightened my skirt and stood. No tears, no raised voice, just the clean sound of my heels against the glass floor as I walked toward the door. We'd love to arrange a farewell gathering, Dana called after me. Don't bother, I said without turning around. I'd hate to disrupt the carefully curated image of your new era. Out on the floor, no one looked at me. Heads dropped, phones came up, screens suddenly fascinating. Even the receptionist pretended to reorganize her desk as I passed. In the elevator, I finally exhaled. My reflection stared back at me in the steel wall. Perfectly tailored suit, spine straight, chin hucked. Inside, though, I felt hollowed out. This wasn't just a job ending, it was an extraction. I'd helped build this place, and now I was being removed, quietly, cleanly, like a flaw in polished stone. That's the truth about legacy. They love what it produces, just not the people who made it. When the doors opened, I stepped out and didn't look back. The click of the lock behind me sounded louder than usual. My apartment was still, washed in the fading amber light of a riverfront sunset bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Usually that view steadied me. That night, it felt like a stage set after the audience had left. I dropped my bag on the island and stood there with my keys still in my hand. No calendar to obey tomorrow, no early meeting, no inbox filling by the minute. The quiet settled like dust. I drifted into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. Everything felt untouched, pristine, like it belonged to someone else. Minimalism looks elegant when you're moving. When you stop, it just feels vacant. My eyes went to the designer calendar on the wall, the one I'd bought because it made me feel efficient and sharp. All it showed was quarterly brief, 10 a.m. TNC boardroom. That was supposed to be tomorrow. I stared until my eyes burned. I picked up the remote and set it back down without turning anything on. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn alert. LaWoya Vance has updated her title to Strategy Director at Trenton and Chase. I let out a breathless laugh and tossed the phone face down. We used to call ourselves storytellers. That's what Elijah Carr used to say back when we were 5 people crammed in a loft with folding chairs and handwritten vision statements taped to the walls. We believed in narrative, in reputation as something human, not just metrics and polish. Then came the investors. First, new software, then consultants, then the language shifted. Scalability, optimization, digital first. What they meant was cut the old and package the new. It happened slowly. Meetings I wasn't looped into, pitches reassigned, quiet calendar edits. It wasn't sudden. It was a long goodbye written in corporate jargon. I poured a glass of wine I'd been saving for something meaningful and walked barefoot to the window. The city moved on below me, indifferent. I'd made my name synonymous with trust. Clients requested me, journalists called me directly, and still I was erased. Not thanked, not honored, just removed. I set the empty glass down carefully. They hadn't just let me go today. They'd been deleting me for years. Today was just the final confirmation. 2 days later, still in pajamas and barely functioning, my phone buzzed while I brushed my teeth. Monica Ruiz. Heard a rumor. Please tell me it's not true. My heart jumped. Monica was a heavyweight. CEO, magazine covers, household name. I'd guided her through a disaster years ago without a single damaging headline. I rinsed, sat on my bed, and called her back. She answered immediately. Is it true? They said you transitioned out, that my account is being reassigned. I told her yes. The silence that followed was heavy. Then she said, what the hell are they thinking? By lunchtime, the messages stacked up. Clients confused, angry, panicked. One said plainly, if you're gone, I'm gone. I called my old assistant, Trina. She whispered like the walls were listening. Total chaos, she said. People are realizing you were the connective tissue. I laughed beside myself. Later, an email came from Elijah Carr. No subject, just, call me. This shouldn't have happened this way. That night, another message landed. They didn't cut cost, they cut foundation. I read it again and again. That's when it clicked. They hadn't just pushed me out, they'd weakened the one thing they couldn't quantify, trust. The call came at midnight. Elijah's voice sounded tired and sharp all at once. I didn't leave, I was removed, I told him. He went quiet. I didn't think I needed to be there, he said. That hurt more than I expected. He lowered his voice. Listen, this is salvageable. We can walk this back. I'm not walking anywhere, Elijah. Then let me come to you, he said. I can carve out a role, consultant at large, senior advisory. Hell, we'll create a title. You'll keep your accounts. The optics will be that you've been elevated. I blinked. Elevated to where? The attic? No, think of it as strategic repositioning.
Elijah, I said, my voice flat. You're asking me to come back quietly, to pretend none of this happened, to soothe the clients, patch the leaks, put my name on a story I didn't write. He hesitated. The firm needs you, Nora. No, I said. The firm needs me to fix what they broke, but only if I pretend I was never broken by it. He went silent again. Elijah, I continued, you were the one who said relationships are our capital. You used to tell me reputation isn't built, it's lived. And now you want me to pretend integrity is flexible. His tone turned defensive. It's not like that. Things move fast. They always do, I replied, especially when people look the other way. I'm trying to make this right. No, I said gently. You're trying to make it palatable. There was a beat of silence. I could hear city noise behind him. Traffic, sirens, the life of some European city still buzzing as mine was going to sleep. I'm not angry, Elijah, I said finally. I'm clear. There's a difference. He sighed. So that's it? You're out? I'm not here to mop up a mess I didn't make, and I'm definitely not coming back so they can parade me like a trophy for the clients they're bleeding. A longer pause now, then, you could help us turn this around. I could, I said, but I won't. I leaned back into the couch cushions, feeling the weight of those words settle into the room. It's not about title or ego, I said softly. It's about dignity, and I won't rent mine out. I hung up before he could reply. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something that had been missing for a long time. Certainty. The cafe was tucked into the first floor of a boutique hotel just off Michigan Avenue, the kind of place where everyone wore minimalist watches and the water came in tiny glass bottles with French labels. I'd been here before, years ago, when I still thought client breakfast had to look impressive to be impressive. I was early. That surprised me. I wasn't the same Nora anymore, the one who always ran from meeting to meeting, heels clicking, bag overflowing, juggling calls and emails like a circus act. I was still adjusting to stillness, but something about today felt different. I chose a table near the window and ordered an espresso. No pastry. I wanted a clear head. 10 minutes later, Simone Daly walked in. Sleek black coat, firm handshake, and a presence that said she didn't waste time. Executive recruiter to the elite. We'd only spoken briefly over email, but her message had been simple. I heard what happened, and I think it's our turn to do the chasing. She slid into the seat across from me and smiled. You look better than I expected. Expected me to be broken? Honestly, yeah. I liked her already. We talked for 40 minutes. She didn't ask me to relive the firing. She didn't pretend to sympathize. Instead, she laid out a napkin and listed names. Big ones, competitive firms, global players, a few boutique powerhouses, all interested, all aware of my exit. Some had reached out before Simone even made her calls. They don't see you as damaged, she said, sipping her tea. They see you as unclaimed. I tilted my head. Unclaimed? You built the kind of brand inside Trenton & Chase that people assumed was the brand. You're not obsolete, Nora. You're gravity. You hold things together. I sat back, processing. Of all the calls I made, she continued, there was one firm that didn't hesitate, didn't even ask what your number was. They just said, whatever she wants, give her the meeting. I raised an eyebrow. Beckmore Stratagem. I hadn't heard that name in years. A high-integrity shop, discreet, old money but progressive culture. They were the kind of firm that didn't flash. They resonated. Their clients stayed for decades. Their talent rarely left. They don't want you for what you used to do, Simone said. They want to build around you. I blinked. Build? You're not being hired, you're being bet on. Something shifted in my chest. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding the idea that I needed to bounce back, that I had to prove I still had value. But this wasn't about survival, it was about direction. Later that afternoon, I met with Beckmore's managing partner in their golden glass offices overlooking Lakeshore Drive. She greeted me like an old friend, even though we'd never met. I followed your work for years, she said, but what really impressed me was how your clients reacted. That kind of loyalty can't be engineered. We talked values, vision, culture, not numbers, not deliverables. She asked me where I thought the industry was heading, what I would build if no one was looking over my shoulder. By the end of the meeting, she leaned forward, hands folded. We're not interested in rescuing you, she said. We're interested in joining your orbit. That night, I walked along the river, the wind sharp against my coat, and let it sink in. I wasn't a relic. I wasn't overhead. I was the center of something new. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel dismissed. I felt chosen. Beckmore Stratagem moved fast, but I moved faster. By the time we signed the final offer, I already had a folder on my desk labeled T&C Realignment Strategy. Not because I wanted to go back, I didn't, but because I had no interest in playing defense for the rest of my career. I wasn't here to prove I still had worth. I was here to make sure the people who forgot it never got to define it again. I scheduled a meeting with Marion Klein, Beckmore's managing partner. We met again at the same cafe, this time in a quiet corner booth. She ordered black tea, I ordered espresso again. I have a proposal, I said, sliding the folder across the table. She flipped it open and scanned the first page. Her brows lifted. You want to acquire Trenton & Chase, I nodded. And you want us to do it. I want us to do it, I corrected. She didn't speak for a moment, just looked at me with that rare kind of attention executives save for real opportunity. You want to run it. No, I said.
I want to rewire it. That caught her attention. I leaned forward. Their structure is still solid. They've got name recognition, legacy clients, strong staff, what's left of them, but they're culturally hollow. The soul's gone. Marian nodded slowly, thinking. And you think it can be rebuilt? I know it can, but not from inside. They'd fight me every step of the way. I need the leverage of change. From the outside. She tapped her fingers lightly against the folder. You want to lead the integration. As a partner, I said, not an employee. I won't be slotted in. I want to be part of the architecture. She smiled. What's your real motive, Nora? I didn't flinch. It's not revenge. You sure? I took a breath. At first, maybe. I wanted to shake them, scare them. I won't lie. But this isn't about getting even anymore. It's about getting better. She studied me carefully. They'll resist. They'll paint it as hostile. Then let them, I said. By the time the dust settles, we'll have already shifted the culture underneath them. Another beat. Marian closed the folder. What's your condition? Full control, I said. I lead the realignment, the culture, the staffing, the communication. No shadow boards, no legacy veto power. That's not going to sit well with whoever's in charge over there. I'm counting on that. She smiled. You're serious. Dead serious. Marian leaned back and nodded once. Okay, let's draft it. I exhaled for the first time all morning. Later that week, Beckmore's legal team made the first quiet moves. Initial interest, no press, no noise, just the sound of corporate blood pressure rising behind closed doors. I didn't want to demolish Trenton and Chase. I wanted to resurrect it, but only if I could build it with the bones of what it used to be before the buzzwords, before the ego, before the quiet betrayal. This wasn't about getting my seat back at the table. It was about redesigning the table itself. The staff-wide meeting was called under the vague heading Strategic Update and Leadership Visibility. Classic misdirection. I knew the games because I'd helped write the playbook once upon a time. Announce a meeting early, keep the agenda vague, and make sure someone from HR is present, just in case. Most employees came into the glass conference room clutching notepads and mild anxiety. I walked in 5 minutes late on purpose. The chatter stopped instantly. Every head turned. I hadn't set foot in Trenton and Chase's offices in almost 2 months. The room looked the same, but smaller somehow. Or maybe I was just seeing it from a different height. Martin Hale stood near the whiteboard, his tie too tight, his smile already faltering. Dana from HR hovered nearby, clutching a folder like a safety vest. Elijah Carr was nowhere in sight. He was smart enough to know when to stay quiet. Nora, Martin said, forced brightness in his voice, glad you could join us. Everyone, let's welcome back one of our... I'm not here to rejoin, I said, my voice calm but clear. Let's get that straight right now. The silence shifted. He blinked. Dana stiffened. I'm here, I continued, setting my bag down, because Beckmore Stratagem has officially acquired Trenton and Chase as of this morning. The room gasped. Several people looked at each other. A few instinctively reached for their phones. Martin's mouth opened then closed. That's not entirely accurate, he managed finally. We're entering a collaborative partnership. No, I said. You were acquired. Dana stepped forward. There are internal discussions. I'm leading the integration, I interrupted, looking directly at her. Effective immediately. She looked to Martin, but he just stared at me, pale. I know you've all heard rumors, I said, turning to the team, about clients pulling out, about missed deliverables, about management scrambling to fix something without admitting it was broken. I took a breath. You weren't wrong. A ripple went through the room. I wasn't removed because I lost value, I said. I was removed because I made certain people uncomfortable with how much value couldn't be quantified. Martin's jaw clenched. Good. Let me be very clear, I said, scanning the room. I'm not here to bring back the old firm. I'm here to build something better. A pause. And that starts today with the immediate exit of Martin Hale. A beat of stunned silence. Then someone, Trina, my old assistant, clapped. One pair of hands, then two, then a wave of applause swept the room. Hesitant at first, then steady. A few people even stood. Martin looked like he'd swallowed glass. Dana stepped aside as I walked toward the front. I raised a hand to quiet the room. "I'm not here for applause," I said. "I'm here for alignment. This isn't about retribution. This is about reform." I looked around the room. The faces, some familiar, some newer, all watching with a mixture of shock and something else. Hope. This firm lost its compass, and we all felt it, but we have a chance now to reset, to rebuild a place where voices matter more than optics, where relationships aren't exploited, they're earned. Another pause. No one moved. I promise transparency. I promise empathy. And I promise this: no one will ever be blindsided here the way I was. I let that hang in the air for a beat. Martin turned and walked out without a word. No one stopped him. As the door clicked shut behind him, the room breathed. I looked at the team again. This is our new beginning, not mine, ours. And for the first time in that building, I felt taller than the ceiling. He chose the old executive conference room. Of course he did. Elijah Carr sat in the corner, one leg crossed over the other, a legal pad in front of him that he wasn't writing on. He looked thinner, older. The room was the same: polished walnut table, soft leather chairs, framed accolades lining the walls. But it didn't carry the same weight anymore, not now that I held the keys. "Nice speech," he said as I walked in. His voice had that familiar gravel smoothened over years of public appearances and late-night strategy calls. "Thanks," I replied, sitting down across from him. "You didn't stay to hear all of it." "I heard enough." I waited. He looked up at me, jaw tight. "You didn't just come back, you orchestrated a takeover." "Not a takeover," I said. "A course correction." He scoffed. "Don't play semantics. You used Beckmore to absorb us." "No," I said calmly. "I used your mistake to correct a decline you didn't want to see." He exhaled sharply. "So this is how it ends, after everything we built together." "We did build something," I agreed, "and then you handed it off to people who didn't know how to carry it." "That's not fair," he snapped. "You think I wanted this?" "You let it happen," I said, my tone sharper now. "You left a leadership vacuum and Martin filled it with performance metrics and buzzwords. And when I was pushed out, you were on a vineyard tour in Spain." He leaned back, mouth tight. "I didn't come here to gloat," I said. "I came here with an offer." He raised an eyebrow. "You can stay on, as a consultant, title only, no decision-making authority, no direct reports, historical reference, not leadership." "You're joking." "No," he gave a dry laugh. "You want me to sit quietly while you run the firm I founded?" "I want you to preserve your name without sabotaging your legacy," I replied. "There's a difference." He stood up, began pacing slowly, his hand running along the edge of the table. "So I'm supposed to nod politely from the sidelines while you, rewrite history?" "I'm not rewriting anything," I said. "I'm archiving it honestly, respectfully." He turned to face me. "This isn't about realignment. This is about humiliation." I shook my head. "If I wanted revenge, Elijah, you'd be out the building already." He narrowed his eyes. "But I know what you meant to this place, what you meant to me once. That's why I'm offering you a role that lets you stay with dignity." He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked at me. Not with anger, with something closer to resignation. "You're not interested in erasing me," he said. "You're interested in preserving what mattered." "Yes," I said, "but only the parts that still hold up under scrutiny." He sat back down and picked up his pen. "What does the contract say?" "Non-executive advisor," I said. "No salary, quarterly stipend, access to legacy files, no vote." He nodded slowly. Then, without a word, he signed. As he set the pen down, I saw it in his eyes. A quiet understanding. This was no longer his story. It was mine now, and I wasn't burning it down. I was cataloging it, truthfully, finally. For the first time, Elijah Carr became what he never imagined he'd be. A footnote. 6 months later, the lobby looked different. Not just the fresh paint or the rebranded signage, not even the open layout that replaced the closed-door offices. It was something deeper. You could feel it when you walked in. People smiled without flinching. Conversations happened out in the open. No more whispers behind glass.
I stood by the reception desk one morning, sipping my coffee, watching a junior staffer guide a nervous intern through her first day. The intern asked where to find the team huddle. The junior didn't point vaguely or send her to someone else. She walked her there herself. That moment, small, unremarkable, was the proof. Trenton and Chase wasn't just alive again, it was new. After the acquisition, there were weeks of discomfort, people unsure of what would change or whether the change would last. But we didn't rush it. We didn't paint over the rot. We aired it out. We held open forums, no agendas, just space. We rewrote job descriptions to reflect value, not vanity. We moved executives out of their towers and into the bullpen. It wasn't performative, it was human. Clients noticed too. Monica Ruiz returned within a month. Franklin Viga called me personally to say he'd never felt more heard. 3 legacy accounts reinstated their contracts on the condition I remained in oversight. "I'm not just buying services anymore," one client said. "I'm buying philosophy." Revenue ticked up. Turnover plummeted. The culture, what was left of it, began to regrow, this time with roots and real trust. Even the skeptics softened. Dana from HR, who once clutched folders like shields, started every Monday with a coffee roundtable. Martin Hale, he never reached out. Word was he'd landed a role at a tech firm in Austin. Let him have his metrics. We had meaning. Every week I met with the new Culture Council, a rotating group of employees from every level, not because it looked good on paper, but because they had ideas that deserved daylight. A receptionist suggested we offer paid mentorship hours for staff who wanted to cross-train in other departments. We did it. A junior designer asked why we only hired from the same 5 universities. We opened the pipeline. My title didn't matter anymore. I had one, sure, partner, strategic integration lead, but it wasn't the thing people called me. They just called me Nora, and they knew they could knock on my door. One day, someone printed a quote from my first speech and taped it to the wall near the elevator. "We're not here to look back. We're here to look around and do better." That became the compass. People started referencing it in meetings. It ended up in a few slide decks. Someone even screen printed it onto a coffee mug that mysteriously ended up on my desk. This wasn't about fixing the past anymore. It was about honoring it by refusing to repeat it. And I no longer had to fight for my place here, because now I owned it. We met at a small Italian place in River North, the kind with warm lighting, real linen napkins, and a hostess who greeted everyone like an old friend. Monica Ruiz was already seated by the window when I arrived, her hair pulled back, a glass of red in hand. She stood and hugged me like we hadn't just seen each other last week. "I ordered your favorite," she said, sliding a basket of crusty bread toward me. "You still eat carbs, right?" "I eat victories," I joked, "and tonight that includes carbs." We laughed. It felt easy, like how it used to feel before everything turned cold and measured. Dinner was slow, not because of the service, because we wanted it to be. We talked about her new product launch, my new hires, our shared disbelief at the rising price of media placement. Somewhere between the second course and dessert, the conversation turned softer. "Do you ever think about what would have happened," she asked, "if you hadn't been pushed out?" I took a sip of wine and looked out the window for a beat. "All the time," I said, "but not in the way I used to." She nodded, letting the silence sit. "Back then," I continued, "it felt like the biggest insult of my career to be edged out of something I built. It burned. And now? Now maybe they did me a favor." She raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "They forced me to remember who I am outside of a title, outside of someone else's agenda. That place, that name, I thought they were mine, but they were never mine, not really.
"You changed everything, Nora," she said quietly. "Not just the firm, the way people talk about leadership, about accountability. You didn't just rebuild." "I redirected," I said, "and reclaimed." She smiled. "Be honest, was any of it about payback?" I exhaled through my nose. "At first, yeah, it was." She chuckled. "I wanted them to hurt the way I did. I wanted someone to feel the rug pulled out from under them. But that kind of fire burns fast. Eventually, you're just left with smoke. And now it's about meaning," I said. "About making sure no one who comes up behind me has to feel what I felt. About showing people they don't have to twist themselves into shapes to stay valuable." I looked at her and smiled. The victory wasn't that I survived, it's that I built again, and built better. We lingered after dessert, talking about nothing and everything. Eventually, we stepped out into the crisp night air. The city buzzed around us, car horns, laughter, the rumble of trains in the distance. She hugged me again. "You know," she said, "they'll probably write a book about this someday." "Let them," I said. "Just make sure they get the ending right." She grinned. "And what's the ending?" I thought for a moment, then said, "The ending is that I was never just a part of the story. I was the story, and now I get to write the next one." She walked off toward her car, and I stood there a while longer, watching the lights flicker on the river. No anger, no regret, just peace, and the quiet knowledge that legacy isn't what they remember after you're gone, it's what still works after they stop watching. Mine would last.